Right before this lockdown began, I got the chance to see the new film adaptation of Jane Austen's novel Emma. And as a big fan of Jane Austen's work, I can say that I was pleasantly surprised. Film adaptations of classic novels always leave a little something wanting, sometimes a lot of something wanting. And I didn't have high expectations for this film because I'd seen the trailers beforehand. Those trailers were bad. They didn't do the movie any service. You can tell that they were geared toward people who were already familiar with the story, and so they had a bunch of punchlines in the trailer without establishing the lead up to those lines. You get the sense that the trailer showed moments where viewers are supposed to be laughing, but they couldn't be laughing because, unless you had already read the novel, you had no idea why what you were watching was supposed to be funny at all. But anyway, the movie itself was, for the most part, good. The director, Autumn de Wilde, did a good job of capturing the feel of Austen's world, of Hartfield and Highbury. The set pieces and the costumes were all great. And I actually like this film better than the 1996 adaptation of Emma. Mostly because I think that the casting was better. I think that Anya Taylor-Joy was a better Emma than Gwyneth Paltrow. Mostly because she pulled off that balance between conceited but relatable pretty well. And that's a balance that an actress who's playing that character has to be able to convey. The Mr. Elton was better in this movie. The first time I saw him in the trailer, I thought that he looked a bit like Joel Osteen, which was kind of funny. But the only real miscast, in my opinion, was the actor who played Frank Churchill. Not that that actor himself did a bad job. He did fine from a technical standpoint, but he just doesn't look like the Frank Churchill of the novels. In the book, he's kind of a dandy, a bit of a fop. And in this movie, he looks more like a jock, or maybe like a high school or a college football player or something like that. There was really only one big deviation from the book, and this is the infamous nosebleed scene that people were all critical of. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to get too far into it. It didn't make much sense, but really it didn't bother me all that much either. It happened really quick, and it didn't pause on that instance long enough to take me out of the scene and take me out of the moment. Really, there are only two critiques that I have that I want to focus on in this video. And really, I'm not blaming this movie in particular, because it's not the only one that's done this. These are two things that are indicative of a larger pattern in Hollywood in general. So let's start by talking about the butt shots. At the beginning of the movie, in the very first scene where we see Mr. Knightley, he's undressing in his room and we get a full-on view of his bare behind, man butt. There's a balance here though, because later on in the movie, when Emma is getting dressed in her room, we get lady butt as well, because she randomly decides to hike up her dress and check herself out in her mirror. These scenes were brief, but they bothered me. And it wasn't for reasons of prudery or anything like that. It was due to the reasons why I think these shots were included. It's not a case of sex sells. The scenes weren't sexual in any way. What they were indecent. Now, in any other movie, this wouldn't be a big deal, or the scenes wouldn't be a statement in and of themselves. But this is a Jane Austen novel that's being adapted, and Jane Austen's world is a principled world. There is decency, there's propriety, and there's manners. Not snobbishness. Jane Austen laughs at snobs and people who think they're hotshots more than anyone else. Just read the books, you'll see that. But in her world, true manners are a virtue. And this is where the cynicism of Hollywood and of the modern era in general comes into play. Hollywood doesn't want to believe that such a world could exist, or did exist. A truly principled person with dignity and integrity can't be anything more than a historical whitewash, concealing the fact that those people back in Austen's time were just as depraved, selfish, and ignoble as they themselves. They don't understand virtue, and to them, good manners are indistinguishable from snobbery. And so they take shots at this vision of Austen's, even as they profit off of it, which I think is the real crime. They pull back the curtain on these characters, giving the audience a glimpse into their private chambers and moments of indecency that would have mortified them, if they were real, as well as Jane Austen herself. Oh, Mr. Knightley is too good. He's too virtuous. Let's show his butt so that everybody knows that he's just human like the rest of us. That seems to be the idea behind these butt shots. And here's the thing. Maybe you believe that such a world is a historical whitewash. Maybe you want to put out a vision of what you think that historical era was really like. Then do it. You might have an interesting film there, but don't piggyback off of Jane Austen's work in order to present a historical vision that's the complete opposite of her own, one that she would have disagreed with. It's a cowardly thing to do. You're afraid that your own movie might not sell, and so you take a title that you know will sell because it already has an audience who loves the story for what it is, and who's going to pay money to go and see it because they're looking forward to that vision, to that author's worldview, not to whatever they end up being confronted with that Hollywood worked into that story. It's the Knightley scene that's most offensive, because that same scene also ties into my second critique. So you're introducing a character for the first time in the movie, and it's your job as the storyteller to establish his personality. Seems reasonable, right? And here we have a well-mannered, generous guy. He's a good landlord. He's thoughtful of others. He helps his tenant, Robert Martin, out with his own personal problems. He talks to him, helps him work through those. He dances with Harriet at the ball when no one else will. So why, in the very first scene that we see him in, is he being dressed and undressed by his servant as if he's a spoiled nobleman or an overgrown man-baby? He can't put his own boots on by himself, but apparently not, because that's the scene that the movie gives us. Because it's more important to Hollywood to highlight the class inequalities of the period than to be faithful to the story and the characters that they're trying to relate. All through this movie, the servants are shown having to run around and wait on all of the characters' every whim. I think we probably see more of the servants in the movie than we see of people like Frank Churchill, who are more integral to the plot. And the servants don't even really need to be there for the story to proceed as it does in the novel. Like I said, this isn't the only movie that does this. The adaptation of Northanger Abbey, which is another one of Austen's novels that came out a few years ago, had that shot of the poor servant falling asleep, standing on his feet in the hallway, while everyone else was enjoying themselves around the corner at the ball. And again, this goes back to cynicism. Of course there were servants at that time period. It's worth noting that these weren't slaves, they were hired domestics, it was a job for them. But in any case, it's clear what the movie wants us to do. Oh, look at those poor servants and how they have to wait on the rich people hand and foot. Well, yes, that was their job. They got paid for it. But you want to undercut Austen's characters by portraying them as insensitive to their servants, even at the expense of failing to establish their characters. Hollywood loves to do this, to highlight the dark side of history whenever they get the chance. Take the live-action adaptation of Beauty and the Beast that came out a few years ago, for example. During the Be Our Guest song, Lumiere has a line that references the silverware and the dishes, saying, "They can sing, they can dance. After all, this is France." In the original animated classic, This line is accompanied by a cute bit of choreography where the plates and the cups spin around on the tabletop like they're ballroom dancers. This evokes a sense of the magical for children who are watching the movie. Maybe they've never been to France, and the line is geared to making them believe that it's this wonderful place where such things actually happen. Where dreams come true, right? That's the Disney line. It's not a true representation of reality, of course not, but it's a vision of what France is ideally, or the mythos of France, I guess you could say. In the live-action version, Lumiere delivers his line, "After all, this is France," with a reference to one of France's darkest moments, the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror, and he does this by doing a bit with a guillotine on the table. What kid is going to get that reference? It's clear that the joke it was directed toward the adults in the room, who could all snicker and rest assured that there's no beauty or magic in the world, just war and cruelty. These are just two examples. There's many more, and we should ask ourselves, why is Hollywood so obsessed with airing everyone else's dirty laundry? I truly believe that the answer is cynicism. It's no secret that those who move in Hollywood circles are not the most morally upstanding people. Their only motive is profit and reassuring themselves of their own virtue. Now, at one point in time, this crowd was offset by genuine creatives who made movies like the original Beauty and the Beast possible. But the genuine creatives have, in my opinion, been driven out, as evidenced by Hollywood's inability these days to put out anything other than remakes, reboots, and spin-offs. They think that's where the money lies because those same things have made them money in the past, so it's a safe bet. So they drive out the creatives with new ideas and latch on to the old, while at the same time turning a critical eye on these movies and novels because they don't want to believe that anyone was ever more intelligent or moral than they were. Like I said, I'm not going to be too harsh on the Emma movie for this because so many other movies are doing it. I recommend the Emma movie because I think that overall it did a pretty good job. But read the book first, if you haven't, and then go watch the movie. And ask yourselves why certain changes were made and what those changes say about the people who made them. Thank you for watching this video and have a nice day.